An NFL insider revealed new and wild details on John Harbaugh's extension with the Ravens. We talk about that and so much more coming up on this bonus edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here on this Saturday, a little bonus edition of the show, making us your first listen of the day and just a part of your day in general. Free and available on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're a 5-day week plus more daily Ravens show. So Monday through Friday is our regularly scheduled programming, 6 a.m. Eastern. But we also sometimes do have bonus episodes on the weekends when there are the headlines to talk about. We also go live after every single piece of Ravens big news, like we did yesterday after John Harbaugh's extension. Plus, we do it after every single Ravens game as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Happy Saturday. Hopefully everybody's enjoying their weekend. The Ravens certainly got the weekend started off with a bang as they announced a 3-year extension with John Harbaugh, a move that, in my opinion, honestly was expected. If you've been listening to me on the show, it felt pretty likely the Ravens were going to make a move like this because they don't like going into the season with lame duck head coaches. It just is a thing they don't do. It was an expected move that, to me, doesn't change a ton in terms of what expectations are for John Harbaugh. We're going to get to expectations in the final part of the show because I think that there has been a lot of conversation about that, and we talked about that on the live show we did yesterday as well. In the second segment, we're going to get into the next order of business for the Ravens after John Harbaugh's extension. But first, right now in the first segment, an NFL insider revealed new and wild details on John Harbaugh's extension. So we're going to get into that right now. Ian Rapoport of NFL Network, he did a little hit on John Harbaugh's extension, gave some details about it. And honestly, what he said was, I don't want to say surprising, but certainly to some people might be wild, to other people maybe not as wild. But he said, quote, "My understanding is the extension is actually north of his brother Jim," which should be interesting conversation at various tables during holiday time. He's locking through 2028. Obviously, yes, that is the 3-year extension there. John Harbaugh getting rewarded very handsomely for the last handful of seasons in Baltimore. And obviously, the way that Harbaugh is talked about among the Ravens fan base, it is either you love him or you hate him. It just feels like that is what it is. You have a portion of the fan base that thinks Harbaugh is the guy to lead Lamar Jackson to a Super Bowl. You have a portion of the fan base that doesn't. And whether you are on the love side or the hate side, I can understand the perspective. John Harbaugh has been a historic coach throughout the league. He's going to be he is the second highest tenured coach or longest tenured coach in the league at this point. He won a playoff game in his first 5 seasons with the Ravens, including a Super Bowl championship run back in that 2012-2013 season. And he has turned himself into a player's coach. You know, his players want to go to battle for him. And in the regular season, he's put together a better than 600 win percentage in that, which is honestly really, really good, all things considered. But obviously the playoff success over the last handful of seasons, particularly with Lamar Jackson as his quarterback, has not been great. And that is, what have you done for me now lately league, what a lot of people see. So the question has now turned to, is John Harbaugh the right coach for the Ravens? Is he the right coach to lead Lamar Jackson to the Super Bowl? And again, there are varying opinions on that. So if this is true, and if Ian's understanding is accurate, which again, Ian is a very respected NFL reporter, so I'm going to go with what Ian has to say here, his extension being north of his brother Jim. Now, I looked for it. Maybe I just couldn't find it. I don't know if we ever got the numbers for John Harbaugh's previous contract extension. What I saw was it was estimated around $12 million per season, his previous one. Jim Harbaugh's contract with the Chargers is 5 years, $80 million. Do a little quick math. That's $16 million per season. So if John Harbaugh has surpassed Jim in terms of contract extension, average annual value, I'm assuming, is what Ian is talking about here. He would slot in as the third, at least third highest paid coach in the NFL. Because right now, you have Andy Reid, who is at $20 million. At least that was his salary this past season. Andy Reid is number one at $20 million. Number two, Sean Payton, Denver Broncos head coach. He came in at $18 million last season. And then Mike Tomlin and Jim Harbaugh were both at $16 million. So John Harbaugh would slot in right in between Sean Payton and Mike Tomlin and his brother Jim there. So whether that is 17 million or whether he surpassed Sean Payton or tied Sean Payton with 18 million or more than 18 million, that is still the question. I'm not sure if we will ever get those numbers officially. I just don't know. But Ian Rapoport saying that it is going to be, and you can just do the math and figure it out. We did that here on Locked On Ravens. It's going to slot in. He'll be the third highest paid coach, at least in the NFL, if he did surpass his brother Jim, which again, this is kind of the way it goes in the NFL, especially for long tenured coaches and guys who are considered to be good coaches. And I do believe that John Harbaugh, and look, I've been consistent about this. I've not wavered on the point of, I think he's a good coach, but this is the year. And this goes into our conversation about expectations of Harbaugh has his faults, the clock management, some of the decisions, the game planning, challenging has been an issue for him over the last couple of seasons. Like there are things, and his mistakes and his faults can get very loud and they can show up in the biggest moments. Now, that's just not exclusive to John Harbaugh, but when you have a quarterback in Lamar Jackson that is going to be 30 at the end of not next season, but the year after, every year, and I said this on a live, every year that you don't win a Super Bowl is a year that you waste of Lamar Jackson's prime. So John Harbaugh, the longevity is there. The fact that he has turned himself from a young coach back in 2008 and a couple years after that, who really wanted to establish authority, put his foot down, and rubbed veterans in that locker room like Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs the wrong way. He has shifted that mentality of, hey, you know what? This is how I want to coach. This is the coaching style. And I said it on the live yesterday as well. I believe that the only reason John Harbaugh is still around, one, is because of Lamar Jackson. He definitely saved his job back in 2018. There were rumors they were going to trade him to the Dolphins, and that was a 4-5 start he had under Joe Flacco. But I think the other reason is because that he has shifted his coaching style to be more of a player's coach, and that the players, it is hard to have a coach that, one, players are united on. I'm not saying every single player in that locker room is a huge fan. I mean, I don't know if that's the case or not, but not everybody on every team loves each other. It's not just perfect harmony. So, I'm sure there are some players that might disagree a little bit with what John Harbaugh does, this, that, and the other. But generally, the consensus feels like, hey, this is a coach I would play for. This is a coach I want to go to battle for. It can be hard to find a coach like that. It's part of the reason I think Mike Tomlin is still around in Pittsburgh too, where in Pittsburgh, they're asking the same questions that they are in Baltimore about John Harbaugh. Is he the right guy to lead the Steelers to a Super Bowl? And his playoff success has been worse than John Harbaugh's over the course of the last handful of seasons. But I think that when you look at it, the coach prototype now is that young defensive mind, young offensive mind. I think Mike Macdonald, and we talked about this too, the prototypical coach is a Mike Macdonald. And I think Baltimore had that guy. Like, they had a guy that fit the mold. So in my opinion, Harbaugh, yes, the faults are there. The faults are loud. But you would also have 25 teams lining up out the door for John Harbaugh if he were to be let go. And if he was let go, and we'll talk about this more in the final part of the show, if he was let go at the end of next season because, the Ravens falter and, you're looking for a fall guy and Harbaugh turns into that, you have to be sure that the guy you hire can be as good, if not better, than what Harbaugh brings to the table. And there is a potential that would work and a potential that it wouldn't. It just is what it is. So they go with the guy that has, been a staple in the organization, has helped continue to build the culture the Ravens have built. We talked about it on yesterday's morning show with Sam Njoku of the Ravens Talk podcast, where Chidobe Awuzie, the Ravens' new cornerback signing, ended up talking about John Harbaugh as a key reason why he signed with Baltimore, which is another thing that has been said by a lot of players, including DeAndre Hopkins as well, who was their other big free agent signing this offseason. So, John, he's a coach that players want to play for. And that's what my point is about. That's one of the reasons why he is still around. But at the same time, it's a what have you known from me now lately league. Yes, the Ravens have won playoff games over the past 2 seasons. They won one against Houston 2 years ago and one against the Steelers last year. But the ultimate goal is to win a Super Bowl. And I think that when you talk about expectations, and we'll get to this in the final part of the show, that's what you have to aim for with Lamar Jackson in his prime as your franchise quarterback. But John Harbaugh getting lucratively rewarded for his efforts. And again, Ian Rapoport reporting that his extension is going to surpass his brother Jim, which would put him above $16 million per season and put him right in that threshold of at least the third highest paid coach in the NFL. But coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about the next order of business for the Ravens and where they could turn their attention to, because Ian Rapoport had an idea about that as well. So be sure to stay tuned. We got plenty to talk about on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the net. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I want to get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. We're back for our second segment, Locked On Ravens bonus edition on Saturday. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking Ravens football. Baltimore extending John Harbaugh 3 years through 2028. We talked about in the first part of the show. Ian Rapoport revealed key and wild details about the situation. Apparently, his contract is going to be surpassing his brother Jim in terms of value. So that, again, if we're talking average annual value, putting him above Jim Harbaugh. $16 million is what Jim Harbaugh makes. So John would be making $17 million, right around $17 million, maybe. I don't know. But he'd be the third highest paid coach, at least in the NFL, based off of those numbers. But Ian Rapoport also had a thought on what the Ravens could be doing next. What's their next order of business? He mentioned Eric DeCosta. He said, quote, "It's going to be interesting to see when the Baltimore Ravens address the status of general manager Eric DeCosta, also going into the last year of his deal. They've enjoyed an incredible 6-year run together. I'd imagine that would be the next thing for Baltimore to tackle." So we talked about the Ravens not liking the whole lame duck head coach deal. Well, lame duck GM seems to be next here for Eric DeCosta. And if, just predicting, I think the Ravens probably will try to sign Eric DeCosta to an extension before the season starts, entering the last year of his contract there, as Ian Rapoport says, which I think makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of people, and whether it happens in this order or not, you're looking at potential extensions for Lamar Jackson, for Derrick Henry, for maybe Odafe Owe, maybe restructures for guys like Roquan Smith. There are moves that they should make, the Ravens, and moves that they honestly have to make to free up some cap space. And I don't know what their plan is. We can speculate all we want to, but do they want to bring in a veteran edge rusher, a veteran defensive lineman, another veteran corner, another guy you can put in the secondary like a safety? There are question marks there. But I think for DeCosta, he has certainly earned an extension. I think that Baltimore has been able to make a lot of great moves. Eric DeCosta has been able to make a lot of great moves during his time as general manager there. And it feels like he continues to find value. Has every signing he's made, every trade, every draft pick, has it all worked out? No, you're not going to be perfect as an NFL general manager. If someone was, that team would be the dynasty of all dynasties. But I think that overall, DeCosta, you can look back at some of his good draft classes. I think that 2022 was some of his best work. And then you can look back at some of his bad draft classes, like that his first draft class in 2019 was not good. It wasn't good at all. So you take the good with the bad, but you have more good than bad. And I feel like now that you have John Harbaugh under contract, Eric DeCosta is next. But as I said, I don't think this changes much in terms of not only expectations for the Ravens in 2025, for John Harbaugh at least, going back to him for a second here, I don't think it really changes expectation for what could happen if he ends up having a bad year, if the Ravens end up having a bad year for John Harbaugh. And we'll get a little bit more in detail on that in the final part of the show with expectations. But I think for DeCosta, that's looking more of like a, hey, he's going to be here. If they sign him to an extension, they're going to say, hey, he's going to be with us for a while. I think for John Harbaugh, the extension is more of, this is just, it's a formality is essentially what I'm going to call it here, where they can sign him to this extension, but it doesn't mean that Steve Bisciotti won't eat the money if they have a bad year. I think that obviously all parties involved want to continue the relationship. John Harbaugh was very non-committal on his future when, what was it, the end of season press conference was when he was asked about that, and he was kind of non-committal about it. So, at the end of the day, the Ravens could have a bad year, and then John Harbaugh is the guy that, whether you want to call it fall guy or the guy that takes the blame or whatever, and he ends up getting fired. But I think for Eric DeCosta, I'm going to say when, I'm, decently confident it'll happen. We'll see. But if/when the Eric DeCosta extension happens, that's going to be more of okay. You feel more secure that he'll be in Baltimore longer. But for Harbaugh, I think you still take it year by year, in my opinion there. So I know that the extension, 3 years, he's going to be in Baltimore for 3 years. I don't think it's going to work that way. Where, yes, if John Harbaugh has a great year, wins the Super Bowl or gets to the Super Bowl, he'll stay around. And the extension, it'll look great. But, if they miss the playoffs or another first-round exit, I think that's a real conversation that has to be had. And honestly, if that is what happens, then I think you move on. But we'll dive more into that in the final part of the show. I think the next order of business is definitely, I think Derrick Henry / Lamar Jackson are your two there. I don't know when those deals get done, if they get done. Lamar and Derrick Henry, it's a dynamic duo. Henry obviously has expressed major interest in staying in Baltimore for the rest of his career. You got to take advantage of that and get the deal done now. Get the Lamar extension done now. And the reason, and I keep bringing back the quote from Jake Liscow, who's one of the hosts of Locked On Bengals, and he put it out on social media, and I think it really is it's a quote to live by if you're an NFL team. If you dig in over 1 million today, you'll lose 5 million tomorrow if another big extension is signed. So if the Ravens had signed Derrick Henry to the Saquon extension before the Eagles signed Saquon to the Saquon extension, you would have had a situation where you wouldn't have to pay the extra couple million that I think the Ravens are going to have to pay for Derrick Henry now, where the running back position, I get that there's all this positional value stuff and running back, 30 years old. Derrick Henry's, we talked about this with Sam yesterday. Derrick Henry's just built different. That's all I can say about it. So hopefully they can get that done. And same thing with Lamar, right? The Bills, if Lamar and the Ravens had done that, the Bills would be the team that would have to match or surpass what the Ravens and Lamar did. But instead it's the other way around, where the Bills and Josh got that deal done, reset the market. Now the Ravens and Lamar, that's a deal that they're going to have to surpass. But what if another quarterback signs an extension? And that's going to be the next benchmark. So I think the sooner you can get it done, the better. Obviously, just don't throw money at guys or throw money at guys. You got to negotiate the deals. But we know Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are both worthwhile of those extensions. It'll free up money on the cap for this year, allow you to maybe make a move or two to continue to round out your roster. You still have 11 draft picks. So as I said, I think you should be aggressive this year. And aggressive can look a lot of different ways for an NFL organization. But we'll see how they end up going about that, because I think that they have opportunities to. And, Eric DeCosta is another move. I know it's not going to impact the on-field play, at least in terms of DeCosta's not going out there and catching passes or intercepting balls or whatnot. But I think that that's another move Baltimore probably has on their radar. And while I don't expect it to be the next move they make overall, which, again, now that I said that, it's probably going to be, it'll probably be a move that does happen by the time this season begins. And we'll talk about it when it does. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll get into the expectation conversation. I've been teasing it. I've been talking about it the whole show. We'll talk about their expectations, especially with John Harbaugh now locked in for 3 more seasons with a new contract. So be sure to stay tuned. We got plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. Back here, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking Ravens football bonus edition on Saturday. Be sure you like and subscribe in video form and audio form. More 5-day a week plus more daily Ravens podcasts. We take no breaks, even in the off season. We are here for you at least 5 days per week, if not more, with some of the bonus content we put out here. And again, yesterday was episode 1,475 for me. Never missed a weekly episode of the show. Started this up in 2019 and have been 5 days a week ever since. So Be sure to tell a friend, tell a family member. We have them covered. Of course, we have you covered on Locked On Ravens as well. And whether you're an everyday or a first-time listener or somewhere in the middle, thank you for your support. Baltimore's expectations should not change here. I talked about it. The expectations for Harbaugh should not change with this extension. John Harbaugh was going to get a deal. Something we had talked about on multiple shows throughout the offseason so far. It's like, yeah, that's a move that's probably going to happen, but it's not going to change much in terms of what the team has to do. This team, it's a Super Bowl, right? It's Super Bowl or bust. You have Lamar Jackson. You have Derrick Henry. You have the best wide receiver group Lamar has ever had. You have, a tight end room that, in my opinion, is the best in the NFL. Your offensive line has multiple stars on it. Your defense, you're filling out the holes, but you also have stars there. Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Roquan Smith, Nabi Madubuike, etc. This is a big year for Baltimore, and especially because the NFL is wide open, in my opinion. I think Kansas City, while you got to respect them, and we talked about that yesterday, you got to respect the Chiefs. They're the AFC. They're the team to beat in the AFC. They've been the team that have represented for the most part and gotten the better of most of the other teams in the league and in the AFC. Got to beat the Chiefs. But, I think that the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, I know a lot of people like to put the Bengals in this conversation, but I really think the top three is Chiefs and Bills and Ravens. No order there, but just those are my three. Then you have other teams that are going to be looking to make a jump, like the Bengals, like the Steelers, like the Chargers. The Jets are going to try with Justin Fields. There are going to be a lot of teams. Denver is another one that you got to look at as well. Like, there are teams that are going to do that. So, Baltimore, you should get aggressive, but what happens if you fall short again? Well, as I said on the live show, I think that if it's anything, AFC Championship is kind of a fine line, and if the Ravens and Harbaugh meet the championship game again, I don't think he gets fired. If it's a wild card or divisional exit or miss the playoffs, I think he does, and I think that's how it should be. I think that is fair at this point, where you want to see growth. And we talked about my growth ladder yesterday where, 2018, they lose in the first round. 2019, they get the bye. That's growth. 2020, they win a playoff game. That's more growth. But then you miss the playoffs, lose in the wild card round again. You lose in the championship game after a historic year, and then you lose in the divisional round. It has to be Super Bowl here for John Harbaugh. And that just is, to me, it is what it is. Where, yes, Harbaugh, in my opinion, is a good coach. And he would be a good coach somewhere else too. But sometimes tenures just run out. Time is just up. We saw that with Greg Roman. Greg Roman was incredible his first year in Baltimore. But after that, we never really saw any growth from Greg Roman offenses. Honestly, it was regression from Greg Roman offenses. And he probably stayed on a year too late, maybe 2 years too late. But, it's not this exact same conversation. But, it is what have you done for me now lately? And if the Ravens have another disappointing season, yes, I think that Super Bowl or bust culture has been overblown over the course of the last handful of seasons. But what else is your goal when you're competing? It's to win a championship, and that's what it should be. And John Harbaugh is a championship winning coach. He has been there. He has done that. He has the experience. But we've seen a lot of historic coaches be moved off of because the timing just was right, and it was the time. So hopefully for everybody involved, John Harbaugh can be the guy to lead. I'm rooting for John Harbaugh to lead the Ravens to a Super Bowl. I'm rooting for the Lamar Jackson, John Harbaugh duo to get a ring together. But this extension does not change much for me in terms of, now that he has the security of 3 years, now it's okay for the Ravens to have a lesser season than originally expected. I'm not doing that. My expectations do not change for the Ravens in 2025. And the expectations for John Harbaugh and what constitutes him being safe or not, that also does not change for me. Where Harbaugh is a guy that over the course of his career as a coach in Baltimore has had a lot of influence on a lot of things. And, he and Lamar have a bond together, and he's been someone that has been there through a lot of ups and downs as well. But you want to be able to get back to the Super Bowl. The Ravens have not been back to the Super Bowl in over a decade. And while, some teams have never been there and there's a standard. Chidobe Awuzie said this. There is a standard in Baltimore that is just different. You win 2 Super Bowls early on in this franchise's history, at least compared to other teams. And, there's a thirst in Baltimore to get back there. The Ravens know they have the talent to get back there. And honestly, I think it's a good thing for this team to have such high expectations because they have put it on themselves in a good way. You have a talented team. You have a good coach. You have the pieces. You just got to get the job done. And we know a lot of great teams, a lot of great players don't win Super Bowls. And it'd be very unfortunate if the Ravens fall into that category. And again, the conversation with John Harbaugh, some people believe he is the guy to lead them to the Super Bowl. Others are so far out on John Harbaugh that he's not the guy to win the Super Bowl or the next guy that can lead Lamar or the Ravens to get that championship. And whichever side of that argument you are on, there are reasons for it. There are reasons why John Harbaugh is regarded as a good coach. There are also reasons why the Ravens have not been back to the Super Bowl since 2012, 2013. It's interesting because, when you look at the Ravens and their disappointing playoff losses, I would classify that as 2019, 2023, and 2024. Talked about this on the live yesterday, which, by the way, if you didn't know, we did a live. I've been plugging it throughout the show. Be sure you check it out because that was our instant reaction. But 2019, I put that a lot on John Harbaugh. The game plan wasn't good. The Ravens got bullied out of doing what they wanted to do after a historic offensive season. I put that a lot on John Harbaugh. 2023, I put that on John Harbaugh. I think the game plan was bad. I think, again, they got bullied out of doing what they wanted to do, and it was rough. It's not all on John Harbaugh, but, a lot of the blame does go to him. 2024, I don't. Last year, Buffalo, I don't. I think that was more of a player execution thing, Harbaugh wasn't out there throwing interceptions, fumbling the ball, dropping passes. I think that last year was more of a player issue than a John Harbaugh issue. So that's why I think there were egregious mistakes in 2019 and 2023 for John Harbaugh and that coaching staff. 2024, I don't really see it that way. Where sure, there were some things and the coach is always going to get blamed, but for being honest, I thought Harbaugh did fine in that game. It was more player execution. So I think that when you talk about maybe the future, and if we want to go down this pathway again, I did it yesterday, but we can do it again today. If the Ravens do move on from John Harbaugh, I think the most likely solution is promoting Todd Monken to head coach. He's been getting interviews, and I don't think the Ravens want to completely reset with Lamar Jackson in his prime. And I think Monken is more than deserving of a head coaching opportunity. And I think the Baltimore is a great head coaching spot for anybody. So I know that a lot of people will be calling for external names if that happens. And again, we are talking way down the line here. We are talking, again, this is the hypothetical of if they don't win the Super Bowl or make it or even championship game or whatnot. But you have to be sure that you hire the right coach for Lamar, you hire the right coach for your team. And I think that it might honestly be too big of a risk to go outside the organization for that, where, yes, you want to hire the best guy. And if that is outside the organization, by all means, go do it, right? But it's just that resetability and, okay, how long is that going to take? Because, there is chemistry between Lamar and John Harbaugh, between the team and John Harbaugh. I think you continue that chemistry with Todd Monken if that is what happens. But hopefully we're not having that conversation. Hopefully the Ravens win the Super Bowl with John Harbaugh, and that is what we're celebrating. But there are probably two different ways it goes. And I think there is a fine line of AFC Championship game being the one result where you're kind of unsure, whereas making the Super Bowl or winning it, you say, all right, Harbaugh definitely stays. Divisional round or less, in my opinion, Harbaugh should probably go for that. But hey, this is a guy that has won over 200 regular season games over the course of his career. He's somebody that, has been a staple in Baltimore. As I mentioned, he's the second longest tenured head coach in the league, and a 623 winning percentage in the regular season is nothing to scoff at. But I think in Baltimore, the expectations now, regular season, while it matters for a lot of different things, for sure, that's not what people look at because, we gloss over the Ravens 13-4 record in 2023 or going 14-2 in 2019. Why? Because they didn't win when it mattered. So that to me is where, yes, we've surpassed you got to have a good regular season. That's a really good step. We know the Ravens are a good regular season team. We know John Harbaugh is a good regular season coach. There's no doubt about that. John Harbaugh is one of the best regular season coaches there is ever in NFL history. I mean, you look at some of what John Harbaugh's records have been and how he's gone across the course of his career. He's someone that has broken records, franchise records, and is up there in NFL history in terms of wins and percentage and whatnot. But right now, the goal is for Baltimore to win a Super Bowl, and hopefully John Harbaugh can be the coach that gets them there and wins the big game. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. On the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. Be sure you stick around here because if there are any more headlines for tomorrow, we'll do another bonus episode. But if not, we'll just be back here on Monday for regularly scheduled programming. But either way, I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.